I always thought ruin would arrive loudly, like a car crash or a screaming boss, but mine started with $3.50 in a dirty bus station. I just wanted to help an old man whose hands were shaking too hard to count his change. I didn't know he was buying my life. I didn't know that when he leaned in to whisper, he wasn't saying thank you. He was telling me to run. The windows of the Greyhound bus were streaked with grime, a chaotic map of dried rain and highway dust that made the world outside look bruised. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, trying to calm the vibration in my hands. I was 33 years old, and I was relearning how to breathe. Technically, I was heading to Marowak for a second-round interview at a logistics firm that did not know my name was Mud in 3 adjacent counties. They knew me as Willow Russell, the applicant with the impeccable compliance certification and the 5-year gap on her resume that I had creatively labeled as freelance consulting. They did not know me as Willow Russell, the woman whose face had been plastered on the local 6 o'clock news 6 months ago, looking deer in headlights guilty while a reporter shouted questions about missing inventory and falsified safety logs. I had not stolen anything. I had not falsified anything. I had simply been the person holding the clipboard when the music stopped. That was the lesson I had learned, the one that had cost me my apartment, my reputation, and my ability to sleep through the night without waking up with a heart rate of 120. In the corporate world, truth was a luxury asset, and I had been too poor to afford it. So now, I was going to Marowak. It was a 3-hour ride to a city that smelled like industrial runoff and damp concrete, but it was a city where nobody knew me. That was the only qualification that mattered. I checked my watch. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. My interview was at 2 in the afternoon. I had plenty of time to get there, find a coffee shop, fix my hair in the bathroom, and recite my answers until they sounded like the truth. The bus pulled into Marowak Central Transit with a hydraulic hiss that sounded like a heavy sigh. The station was a brutalist block of gray cement that seemed designed to drain the color out of anyone who stepped inside. I gathered my bag. Checking the zipper for the 3rd time, paranoia was my new baseline. I stepped off the bus and into the humidity of the station, the air thick with the smell of diesel fumes, floor wax, and cheap pretzels. I needed a transfer ticket to the local metro line. The automated kiosks were all flashing red error lights, because nothing in my life had worked on the first try for half a year. I joined the line for the ticket counter. The woman in front of me was arguing about a schedule change. The man behind me was coughing a wet, rattling cough that made the hair on my neck stand up. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the scuffed linoleum floor. Keep your head down. Willow, do not be memorable. Do not be interesting. Be a ghost in a cheap blazer. The line moved. Finally, I was 2 people away from the counter. That was when I saw him. He was standing at the adjacent window, an old man who looked like he had been constructed out of parchment paper and second-hand clothes. He wore a beige windbreaker that was 2 sizes too big, the cuffs swallowing his hands. He was digging through his pockets with a frantic, trembling energy that made my chest tighten just watching him. I could hear the ticket agent, a man with a face like a closed fist, speaking through the thick glass partition. "You are short," the agent said. His voice was bored, metallic through the speaker. The old man's hands shook harder. He placed a crumpled $5 bill and a handful of quarters on the metal tray. "Please," he said. His voice was thin, reedy. "I just need to get to Eastside. My daughter is waiting. The fare is $8.50. The agent said, "You have $6 here. Step aside." "Sir, I'm not asking for charity," the old man stammered. He patted his chest pockets, then his pants pockets again, coming up with nothing but lint. "I had another dollar. I swear I had another dollar. Sir, step aside. You are holding up the line." The cruelty of it was casual. It wasn't malicious. It was just bureaucratic. The agent didn't care. The people in line behind the old man didn't care. They were shifting their weight, sighing, checking their phones. The old man looked small, shrinking into his oversized jacket, as if he wished he could simply dissolve. I looked at my own wallet. I had a $20 bill tucked behind my ID. I needed it for lunch. I needed it for the metro. Every cent I had was accounted for in a spreadsheet in my head, but I remembered what it felt like to stand in front of a person who held all the power and realize they were not going to help you. I remembered the heat of the camera lights and the coldness of the boardroom. I stepped out of my line. "Excuse me," I said. The ticket agent looked at me with dull irritation. The old man turned, his eyes wide and watery. They were a pale, washed-out blue, rimmed with red. I placed my $20 bill on the counter. "Put his ticket on this," I said, "and a metro pass for me." The old man stared at the money like it was a magic trick. "Miss, you don't have to do that," he said. "It's fine," I said, keeping my voice low. I didn't want attention. I just wanted the knot in my stomach to go away. We've all been there. The agent took the money without a word. He slid the tickets and my change under the glass. I took my pass and handed the other ticket to the old man. "Here," I said, "go see your daughter." He took the ticket. His fingers were ice cold. Brushing against mine, for a second, he didn't move. He just looked at me. Not at my face, but deeper. Like he was searching for something specific in the structure of my jaw or the worry lines around my eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." I turned to walk away. I felt a sudden, strange lightness. For the first time in months, I wasn't the screw-up. I wasn't the liability. I was just a person who had done a decent thing. It felt like taking a sip of fresh water after drinking salt for half a year. I was halfway to the escalator when I felt a hand on my elbow. It wasn't a grab. It was a press, firm and urgent. I spun around. It was the old man. He had moved faster than I thought possible. He was standing entirely too close, invading my personal space in a way that made my survival instincts flare. I opened my mouth to tell him to back off, but he leaned in. He smelled of peppermint and old paper and something sharp, like metallic ozone. "Willow Russell," he whispered. I froze. My blood went cold, stopping dead in my veins. I had not told him my name. I was certain of it. I hadn't told anyone my name since I bought my bus ticket online 3 days ago. He leaned closer, his lips inches from my ear. The tremor in his hands was gone. His voice was no longer reedy or weak. It was low, steady, and terrified. "Don't get on your bus," he said. "They are watching the cameras." I tried to pull my arm away, but his grip tightened. It wasn't aggressive. It was anchoring. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past my shoulder, scanning the mezzanine level above us, his eyes darting with a predator's awareness. "I don't know who you are," I stammered. My voice sounded high and brittle. "How do you know my name?" He ignored the question. He pressed something into the palm of my hand. It felt like a piece of paper, folded into a tight square. "If anyone asks, you don't know me," he said. He was speaking fast, the words clipping against each other. "You never saw me. I was just a beggar. Do you understand? Let go of me," I whispered. "If you want to live normal, throw that away," he said. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a split second, I saw a depth of sorrow that knocked the wind out of me. "But if you keep it, don't trust the phone calls." "What phone calls?" He released my arm abruptly. A group of teenagers with skateboards was pushing past us, laughing loudly, creating a wall of noise and movement. The old man used the distraction. He stepped back, melding into the flow of the crowd. "Wait," I said. He didn't wait. He didn't even look back. He moved toward the south exit with a fluidity that didn't match the trembling senior citizen act he had put on at the counter. He walked like a man who knew exactly where the blind spots were. In 3 seconds, he was gone. I stood there in the middle of the station concourse, people streaming around me like river water around a stone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that drowned out the station announcements. "Willow Russell. They're watching the cameras." I looked up. High on the support pillars, black domes of security cameras stared down like unblinking eyes. I had ignored them before. Now, they felt heavy. I felt the weight of a gaze on the back of my neck. I looked at my hand. I was clutching a folded Greyhound timetable. It was cheap, glossy paper, wrinkled from being in his pocket. I should throw it away. That was the rational response. This was a crazy person. A grifter who had somehow overheard my name, maybe saw it on a luggage tag, and was running some kind of confidence game. That was the only explanation that made sense. If you want to live normal, throw that away. I walked toward a trash can. My hand hovered over the opening. I could drop it. I could walk to the metro, go to my interview, get the job, and pretend this never happened. I could go back to being boring. But he had known my name, and he had known I was getting on a bus. I pulled my hand back. I shoved the timetable into my blazer pocket. I told myself I was doing it for evidence, just in case he followed me. I told myself I wasn't curious. I was just being prudent. I needed to get out of the open. I needed to move. My connection was a local shuttle bus that would take me to the business district. I checked the monitor. Gate 4. Boarding now. I walked toward the gate, my legs feeling stiff and wooden. Every person I passed was a potential threat. The man reading the newspaper, the woman eating a bagel. Were they watching me? Stop it. I told myself, you are spiraling. You are having a panic attack in a bus station because you are stressed about an interview. I reached the gate. The shuttle was idling, the engine rumbling. The driver was a heavy-set woman chewing gum. I scanned my ticket. She nodded without looking at me. I stepped onto the bus. It was mostly empty. I moved toward the back, instinctively seeking a corner where I could see the whole space. Then I saw them. 2 men were sitting in the front row, on opposite sides of the aisle. They were wearing uniforms that said Transit Security on the back in reflective yellow letters. But they weren't talking to each other. They weren't checking phones. They were sitting bolt upright, their postures rigid, their heads swiveling slowly as passengers boarded. They looked like sharks in polyester. One of them locked eyes with me as I walked down the aisle. His face was blank, smooth, and utterly devoid of the boredom that every other transit employee in the world possessed. His eyes were cold, calculating. He looked at my face, then down at my bag, then back at my face. He didn't blink. I forced myself to keep walking. Don't react. Don't run. I took a seat 4 rows behind them, on the window side. I slumped down, making myself small. My breath was coming in short. Shallow gasps. Don't get on your bus. I had gotten on the bus. The doors hissed shut. The engine revved. The bus lurched forward. Pulling out of the bay and into the gray sunlight of Marowak, I waited until we were on the main road, until the rhythm of the road noise was loud enough to cover the sound of paper crinkling. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the timetable. My hands were shaking. I placed it on my lap, shielding it with my purse so the security guards couldn't see. I unfolded it. It wasn't just a timetable. Taped to the inside, right over the schedule for the weekend express, was a small silver key. It looked like a padlock key or a storage unit key. The head of the key was stamped with a number, 402. Below the key, written in a shaky, jagged script with a blue ballpoint pen, were words: Harbor Lock, Unit 402, password, Bluebird. And below that, one single line that made the air in the bus feel suddenly freezing. If I vanish. It wasn't an accident. I stared at the words. The ink was smeared slightly, as if he had written it in a hurry, or while his hand was trembling, which it had been. This wasn't a con. A con artist asks for money. A con artist sells you a bridge. A con artist doesn't give you a key and a death note. I looked up at the front of the bus. The 2 security guards were still there. The one who had looked at me was now speaking into a radio attached to his shoulder. He wasn't speaking loudly. He was murmuring. He turned his head slightly, and I saw his profile. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at the reflection in the driver's large rear-view mirror. He was looking at me. I felt a surge of nausea. The reality of the situation crashed into me. The old man hadn't been tracking someone. He had been tracked, and by helping him, by interacting with him, by letting him touch my arm and whisper in my ear, I had let the infection jump hosts. I was the handoff. I looked at the window. We were passing through a commercial district, strip malls, car dealerships, fast food joints. I couldn't stay on this bus. If those men were really security, they were just doing a job. But if they weren't? If they were the old man whispered about? The bus began to slow for a stop. It wasn't my stop. My interview was still 20 minutes away. I didn't care. I stood up. My knees felt weak. I grabbed my bag. I walked down the aisle. I had to pass them. I had to walk right between the two men in the front row. I kept my eyes fixed on the door. Just a passenger getting off. Just a normal person who made a mistake. As I passed the guard on the left, he shifted. His boot slid out into the aisle, blocking my path for a fraction of a second. I stumbled, catching myself on the seat back. "Excuse me," I said. He didn't move his foot. He looked up at me, up close. His eyes were even colder. They were flat, like the eyes of a fish on ice. "You sure this is your stop?" "Ma'am?" he asked. His voice was deep, smooth. "Yes," I said. "I missed my stop. I'm late." He held my gaze for a second too long, a second that stretched out into an eternity. He was assessing me. He was deciding whether to let me pass or to stand up and close the distance. Then, the bus driver opened the doors with a loud pneumatic hiss. The guard smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Have a safe day, Ms. Russell," he said. He knew my name. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. I lunged past him and stumbled down the steps, hitting the pavement hard. I didn't look back. I started walking, fast. I turned the corner into a drugstore parking lot, putting a building between me and the bus. Only then did I stop. I leaned against the brick wall of the drugstore, gasping for air. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. He knew my name. The guard knew my name. I had never met him. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I reached for my phone. I needed to call. Who? The police? And say what? That an old man gave me a key and a security guard was polite to me? They would laugh. Or worse, they would run my name and see the Briar Ridge scandal and treat me like a hysterical woman who was cracking under pressure. My phone buzzed in my hand. I jumped, nearly dropping it. I looked at the screen. It was a local number. Area code 419. Merriwick. I stared at it. I didn't know anyone in Merriwick except the hiring manager I was supposed to meet in an hour. Maybe it was them? Maybe they were calling to reschedule? I swiped the screen. "Hello?" I said. My voice was a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A silence that felt thick, filled with the faint static of a connection being routed through too many servers. Then, a voice. It was male, synthesized, smooth. It sounded like the automated voice of a customer service bot, but the cadence was human. "Ms. Russell," the voice said. "Who is this?" I asked. "Did you make it safely to your destination?" The voice asked. The politeness was terrifying. It was the politeness of a surgeon sharpening a scalpel. I didn't answer. I looked around the parking lot. Was someone watching me now? Was there a car parked across the street? A drone? "You got off the bus early." The voice continued. That was unexpected. We dislike unexpected variables. I hung up. I didn't just hang up. I powered the phone down. My fingers were fumbling, clumsy with fear. I shoved the phone into the deepest pocket of my bag. I stood there in the shadow of the drugstore, clutching my purse to my chest. I was 33 years old. I was a compliance officer. I followed rules. I respected boundaries. I lived a life of careful, curated safety, and now I was standing in a parking lot in a city where I didn't belong, holding a key to a storage unit I didn't own, hiding from men who knew my name and disliked variables. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the key. If I vanish, it wasn't an accident. The old man had passed me a torch. He had seen something in me, maybe the same desperation he had, or maybe just the convenience of a stranger who paid his fare. He had chosen me, and now I had a choice. I could go to the police station, I could turn the key in, I could try to explain, or I could find out what was in Unit 402. I looked at the timetable again. Harbor Lock. I knew that name. I had seen a billboard for it on the ride in. It was a chain. There was one only 2 miles from here. I checked my watch. My interview was in 50 minutes. If I went to the interview, I was Willow Russell, the tainted candidate begging for a second chance. If I went to Harbor Lock, I was, what? A fool? A victim? I thought about the old man's eyes, the terror in them, and the guard's eyes, the emptiness in them. Don't get on your bus. He had tried to save me. Even while he was running for his life, he had tried to warn me. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of exhaust and rain. I wasn't going to the interview. I buttoned my blazer. I fixed my strap on my shoulder. I walked out to the curb and raised my hand to hail a taxi. I wasn't going to use an app. I wasn't going to leave a digital trail. I was going to Harbor Lock. Because for the first time in 6 months, someone had looked at me and seen something worth saving, and I needed to know why. The neon sign of the motel flickered with a rhythmic, dying buzz that sounded like a trapped insect. It was called the Vista Motor Lodge, though the only view was of a cracked parking lot and the backside of a muffler shop. I had paid in cash. $65 for a room that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and decades of bad decisions. I had signed the registry as Jane Miller, the clerk, a guy with a neck tattoo and eyes that had seen too much to care. Didn't even blink. He just slid the key across the counter and went back to watching a game show on a portable television. Room 112 was small. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown, and the bedspread looked like it had been chosen for its ability to hide stains. I locked the door, then engaged the deadbolt, then dragged the single heavy armchair from the corner and wedged it under the door handle. It was a cliché from a movie, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the upholstery. I sat on the edge of the bed, my knees pulled up to my chest. The television was off. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the gap in the curtains where the neon sign bled through. Painting a stripe of orange light across the room every 2 seconds, I was 33 years old. I was a professional. I had a degree in business administration. I knew how to navigate corporate hierarchies and audit compliance logs. I did not know how to be a fugitive, but that was what I was. I felt it in the marrow of my bones. The phone call in the parking lot had stripped away the thin veneer of civilization I relied on. We dislike unexpected variables. I opened my bag and took out the items. The timetable, the key, the silver medal caught the orange light. I pulled out my laptop. I hesitated before opening it. If they could track my phone, could they track this? I didn't know the technical capabilities of the people I was running from. I decided to leave the Wi-Fi off. I just needed to think. I had tried to search for the old man on my phone before I turned it off. I had typed Old Man Bus Station Marrowick and Marrowick Transit Death, but the internet was a fire hose of useless information. Every search funneled into noise, ads for insurance, news about a bus route expansion. Nothing about a terrified man in a beige windbreaker. I looked at the key again. It was a standard brass key, but the head was encased in blue plastic. I held it up to the light. There was a faint, embossed logo on the plastic, a stylized anchor. I recognized it, not from the internet, but from the physical world. I had seen that anchor on a billboard 3 miles back, looming over the highway like a promise of security. Harbor Lock Storage. It was a chain. There were 3 or 4 of them in the greater Marrowick area. This key belonged to one of them, and the note said, Unit 402. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, my shoes on. Every time a car drove past, tires crunching on the gravel, my heart hammered against my ribs. I imagined the door bursting open. I imagined the smooth-faced security guard from the bus standing over me. Paranoia is a physical weight. It sits on your chest. It makes your skin itch. It makes you question the integrity of the walls around you. I felt ashamed of it. I felt dramatic. I told myself I was blowing this out of proportion, that the old man was just mentally ill, and the phone call was a wrong number or a prank. But then I would remember the look in the guard's eyes, the way he had blocked the aisle, the way the voice on the phone had known I got off early. That wasn't paranoia, that was data. Morning came like a gray bruise spreading across the sky. I waited until 7 o'clock. I washed my face with cold water. Avoiding looking at myself in the mirror because I knew I wouldn't like what I saw, I looked like a woman who was unraveling. I left the motel without checking out. I just left the key on the dresser. Harborlock Storage was located in an industrial park on the edge of the city, sandwiched between a concrete supply yard and a fenced-off electrical substation. It was a fortress of corrugated metal, painted a cheerful, incongruous orange. I parked my car at a diner down the street and walked the last quarter mile. I didn't want my license plate on their cameras. The front office smelled of coffee and cardboard. The clerk was a young man with oversized headphones around his neck and a name tag that said Heil. He looked up as I entered, his expression pleasantly vacant. "Can I help you?" Kyle asked. I held up the key. "I'm here to access Unit 402. I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. My uncle asked me to swing by and grab some paperwork for him. He said everything was paid up. Kyle squinted at the key. "Unit 402. That's outside. Row D." He typed something into his computer. I held my breath. If the unit was flagged, if the police were waiting, this was the moment the trap would spring. "Yeah, looks good," Kyle said. "Paid through the end of the year. Cash up front. Your uncle is a thorough guy." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "He likes to be prepared. Yeah, I remember him," Kyle said. He chuckled. "Nice guy. Little intense. Though, he asked me about the camera angles 3 times. Wanted to know exactly how long we keep the footage before overwriting it." My stomach dropped. That wasn't the behavior of a man storing old furniture. That was the behavior of a man hiding evidence. "He worries about security," I said weakly. "Clearly," Kyle said. He pushed a clipboard toward me. "Just need you to sign in as a visitor. Policy." I picked up the pen. For a second, I considered writing Willow Russell, but the old man's voice echoed in my head. "If you want to live normal, throw that away." I wrote Jane Miller. Row D was a long alleyway of identical orange doors. The wind whistled through the corridor, rattling the metal sheeting. I counted the numbers. 398, 400, 402. I looked around. There was a camera mounted on the corner of the building. Its lens pointed down the alley. I pulled my hood up. I turned my back to the camera as I inserted the key into the padlock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I slid the latch back and rolled the door up. It groaned, a rusty screech that sounded deafening in the quiet morning. I expected the unit to be full. I expected boxes of clothes, old bicycles, maybe a mattress. It was empty, a 10 by 10 concrete box, swept clean. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight I had let in. In the exact center of the floor, sitting on the concrete like an altar offering, was a single wooden chair, and on the chair sat a battered brown leather briefcase. I stepped inside and pulled the door down behind me, plunging the unit into semi-darkness. I didn't want to be seen from the alley. I fumbled for the light switch on the wall. A single bulb flickered to life overhead, casting long, stark shadows. I approached the chair. My footsteps echoed. The briefcase was not locked. I pressed the latches, and they snapped open with a loud clack. I lifted the lid. Inside, the contents were arranged with obsessive neatness. There was a worn paperback novel, a thriller from the 90s. There was a cheap black flip phone, powered off, and there was a thick manila envelope. On the front of the envelope, written in black marker, were words that made the air leave my lungs. "For Willow Russell, only if they follow you." I stared at my name. Seeing it there, in this concrete tomb, felt like a physical blow. It was confirmation of the impossible. He hadn't just bumped into me, he had prepared for me, or for someone like me. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy. I tore the seal. A stack of photocopied documents slid out into my hands. I sat on the concrete floor. Ignoring the cold seeping through my jeans, I began to read. I was a compliance officer. My entire career had been built on reading the boring, dense paperwork that other people skimmed. I knew how to look for the story hidden in the margins of a ledger. The first set of documents was from Marowak Community Lift. It looked like a standard annual report for a nonprofit organization. Glossy font, smiling photos of diverse families, mission statements about urban renewal and housing assistance. But behind the glossy pages were photocopies of internal bank transfers, grants, massive grants, $500,000 here, $2 million there, all coming from state and municipal funds, earmarked for neighborhood revitalization. I flipped the page. The money went into the nonprofit, and then it went out immediately. Payments to Northline Restoration Group, payments to Apex Consulting, payments to Vantage Logistics. I didn't recognize the names, but I recognized the pattern. I picked up the second set of documents. These were on the letterhead of Pinevale Trust, a regional bank that I knew well. They had branches on every corner in the Midwest. Here, the pattern completed the circle. Northline Restoration Group, the contractor receiving the nonprofit money, had an account at Pinevale Trust, and according to these transaction logs, Northline was sending monthly wire transfers labeled consulting fees to 3 specific personal accounts. I traced the account numbers. The old man had done the work for me. He had handwritten notes in the margins, connecting the account numbers to names. One of the names was on the board of directors for Merriwick Community Lift. Another name was a city council member, and the third name was a senior vice president at Pinevale Trust. I sat back, my head spinning. It was elegant. It was simple. It was theft. They were taking public money meant for poor neighborhoods, laundering it through a shell construction company, and funneling it back into their own pockets. It looked like charity on the front end and business expenses on the back end, but in the middle, it was just stealing, and the sums were staggering. Over 3 years, the total circled in red pen was $12 million. This wasn't just corruption. This was an ecosystem. I looked at the bottom of the stack. There was a single sheet of notebook paper. They kill the whistleblowers before they can whistle. I tried to go to the feds. The agent I spoke to called Pinevale Trust 10 minutes after I left his office. Trust no one with a badge in this city. I shivered. I looked at the worn paperback book. I picked it up. It felt light. I opened it. The pages had been hollowed out. Inside the cavity was a small digital voice recorder and a USB drive. I didn't touch them. I was afraid to touch them. Suddenly, the cheap flip phone in the briefcase lit up. The screen glowed blue in the dim light. It began to vibrate against the leather lining. Bzzzt, bzzzt. I stared at it. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave everything there and sprint out of the storage unit and keep running until I hit the coast. I looked at the caller ID. It wasn't a number. It was a saved contact name. If you're smart, call her. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. Then it lit up again. Bzzzt, bzzzt. My hand moved on its own. I picked up the phone. I flipped it open. I didn't say anything. I just held it to my ear and listened to the silence. "Don't hang up," a woman's voice said. The voice was sharp, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. It sounded like a voice that was used to giving orders. "Who is this?" I whispered. "Listen to me very carefully." "Willow," the woman said, "do not go to the Merriwick Police. Do not go to the Sheriff's Department. Do not go to the local FBI field office. How do you know my name?" "Because Gideon told me he was going to try a Hail Mary." She said, "And you're the one holding the phone, Gideon?" "The old man," she said impatiently. "Gideon Slate. That was his name." "Was?" I asked. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. There was a pause on the other line, a hesitation that told me more than her words did. "We don't know yet," she said. "But if he passed the package to you, it means he's gone. He wouldn't have involved a civilian unless he had no other choice." "I'm not involved," I said, my voice rising. "I just helped him with a ticket. I don't want this." "You are involved," she snapped. "You are holding the briefcase. You are on the camera entering that unit. They know you have it, or they suspect. Why do you think they called you?" "They called me?" The polite voice. She said, "Asking if you reached your destination." That was them checking to see if you were spooked. I felt the walls of the storage unit closing in. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm the person who is going to keep you alive if you stop asking stupid questions and start listening." She said, "Rule number 1. Do not take those documents to your home." Do not take them to your hotel. Where am I supposed to put them? Leave them there. She said, that unit is the safest place for them right now. Take the phone. Take the cash if there is any. Leave the paper. There's no cash. I said, just evidence. Good. She said, that means he wasn't trying to pay you off. He was trying to recruit you. Recruit me? I laughed. A hysterical, jagged sound. I'm a compliance officer. I check boxes. I don't do this. You do now. She said, listen, Willow. Gideon Slate was a contractor. He worked in compliance, just like you. He spent 6 months building that file. He used you at the station because you were a clean interaction. You had no pattern. You were invisible. I'm not invisible anymore, I said bitterly. No, she said. You're a target. And right now, you're a confused target. That buys us about 12 hours. Us? If you want to survive this, meet me. But not yet. Go back to your motel. Act normal. Wait for my call on this phone. Do not use your personal phone. What if they come for me? They won't come during the day. She said, they prefer accidents, suicides, things that look quiet. If they grab you in broad daylight, it raises questions. Just act normal. She hung up. I sat there with the dead phone in my hand. The silence of the storage unit was deafening. Gideon Slate, that was his name. He wasn't just a crazy old man. He was a colleague, a man who did what I did, looked at the numbers and saw the truth, and it had probably gotten him killed. I did what she said. I put the documents back in the envelope. I put the envelope back in the briefcase. I left the voice recorder and the USB drive. I took the flip phone. I closed the briefcase. I walked out of the unit. Pulling the door down, I locked it. I walked back past the office. Kyle was bobbing his head to music. He gave me a wave. Find everything you needed? He asked. Yes, I said. Just old papers. I walked back to my car. The drive back to the motel was a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, but every car looked like a threat. A black sedan, a white van. Were they following me? I reached the Vista Motor Lodge. My car was the only one in the lot besides a beat-up pickup truck. I walked to room 112. I reached for my key card, but then I stopped. I looked at the door. I had left a small piece of clear tape on the bottom corner of the door frame. It was an old trick I had learned from a roommate who stole my food in college. If the door was opened, the tape would peel off or break. The tape was gone. My heart hammered in my throat. I stood frozen on the walkway. I pushed the door open slowly. The room looked exactly as I had left it. The bed was unmade. My bag was on the table. The curtains were drawn. I stepped inside and closed the door. I scanned the room. My suitcase was on the luggage rack. It looked undisturbed. I walked over to it. I had left the zippers positioned exactly in the center. Meeting at the lock, they were now slightly to the left, maybe half an inch. I opened the suitcase. My clothes were folded. My toiletry bag was on top. I unzipped the toiletry bag. I pulled out my shampoo bottle. The cap was unscrewed, not all the way off, just loose, just enough that if I squeezed it, it would leak. I felt a wave of cold horror wash over me. Nothing was stolen. My laptop was still there. My cash was still there. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. We were here. We touched your things. We could have hurt you, but we chose to let you know instead. It was psychological warfare. They wanted me terrified. They wanted me to feel unsafe in the one place I was supposed to be sleeping. They wanted me to know that locks didn't matter. I went into the bathroom. I turned on the sink faucet to hide the sound of my breathing. I gripped the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked like a victim. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. A sob ripped through me, harsh and ugly. I cried for 5 minutes. I cried for the job I didn't get. I cried for the life I had lost 6 months ago. I cried for Gideon Slate, who had looked at me with those terrified blue eyes and begged me to save myself. Then the tears stopped. I sat there on the cold tile floor, wiping my face with the back of my hand. I thought about the documents, the $12 million, the sheer arrogance of it. They were stealing from the poorest people in the city, and they were killing anyone who noticed. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a clean handoff, a random woman at a bus station who would panic and throw the key away, or hand it over to the first authority figure who asked. They thought I was a variable they could remove. I stood up. I washed my face again. I had spent the last 6 months trying to be unnoticeable. I had tried to disappear, to be small, to be compliant. I had apologized for things I didn't do. I had accepted the shame they heaped on me. And it hadn't protected me. It hadn't saved my career. It hadn't kept me safe. Being small didn't work. Being quiet didn't work. I looked at the cheap flip phone in my pocket. Gideon Slate had chosen me. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe he saw the one thing I had been trying to hide. I was good at this. I was good at finding the rot in the system. I was good at the details. I walked back into the bedroom. I checked the door. I checked the window. I wasn't going to run. Running just made you a moving target. I was going to play for time. I was going to find out what Gideon Slate was trying to finish. I sat on the bed and opened the flip phone. I stared at the screen, waiting. Call me. I thought, I'm ready. The location was the atrium of Merriwick General Hospital. It was the sort of place that felt designed to neutralize secrets. Bright, sterile, and teeming with the kind of urgent, mundane humanity that made eavesdropping impossible. Nurses in scrubs power-walked with clipboards, families huddled in anxious circles, and the intercom chimed with a relentless, rhythmic pinging that covered the sound of conversation. I sat at a small, wobbly table near the coffee kiosk, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea I hadn't touched. I checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. The text on the flip phone had been specific. Main lobby, near the plants, 11 sharp. I'm wearing a gray scarf. I watched the revolving doors. Every time they spun, my stomach clenched. I was looking for enemies. I was looking for the security guard from the bus, or the old man from the station, or the police. Instead, I saw a woman who looked like she could be a high school history teacher or a weary librarian. She was sitting 3 tables away, reading a tablet. She wore a sensible navy coat and a thick gray wool scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. She didn't look up. She didn't scan the room. She just turned a page on her screen with a slow, deliberate finger. I waited. The instructions said she would find me. A minute passed, then another. The woman stood up, gathered her bag, and walked toward the trash can near my table. She dropped a napkin in, and without breaking stride, she spoke. Her voice was low, pitched perfectly to blend with the hiss of the espresso machine. "Don't look at me," she said. "Just listen. There is a man in a blue vest by the gift shop who has been watching you for 4 minutes. There is a security camera directly above your head. This is the safest place in the city because nobody wants to cause a scene next to the ER." I stiffened, keeping my eyes on my tea. "Pick up your cup," she said. "Stand up. Walk to the elevators. I will be right behind you. We are going to the 4th floor. Cafeteria overflow seating. It's empty at this hour." I did as I was told. I stood up, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. I walked past the gift shop, forcing myself not to look at the man in the blue vest. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors slid open. I stepped in. The woman with the gray scarf stepped in right after me. As the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the lobby, she turned to me. Her face was striking, not because it was beautiful, but because it was composed of sharp, intelligent angles. Her eyes were dark and tired, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from seeing too much and sleeping too little. "I'm Hollis Mercer," she said. She didn't offer a hand. "I know who you are." "Willow," she interrupted. "We don't have time for introductions. We have about 20 minutes before the man in the blue vest figures out we aren't coming back down." The elevator dinged. 4th floor. We walked into the cafeteria. It was a vast, sunlit space that smelled of industrial soup and disinfectant. Hollis led me to a corner table, far from the serving line, nestled behind a pillar. She sat down and placed a small device on the table, a white noise generator. She clicked it on. It made a faint shh sound, like static rain. "Sit," she said. I sat. Who was he? I asked. The question burst out of me before I could stop it. The old man. Gideon. Who was he? Hollis looked at me, assessing my stability. He was a compliance contractor. She said, like you. But he worked in the shadows of the industry. He specialized in forensic accounting for nonprofits that didn't want to be audited. He was the guy you hired when you wanted to find out where the money was going, but you didn't want the IRS to know you were looking. Why did he give me the key? I asked. Why me? Because you were clean, Hollis said. She said it like it was a clinical diagnosis. Gideon had a system. He called them anchors. When he was moving sensitive data, he never kept it on him. He would find a civilian, someone with no criminal record, no debt, no connections to the players he was investigating, someone boring. I flinched. Boring. He would create a casual interaction. She continued. A bumped shoulder, a dropped wallet, or in your case, a ticket shortage. He would pass the token, the key, the drive, the code, to the anchor. The logic was that if he got picked up, he would be clean, and since the anchor had no idea what they were holding, they wouldn't react like a guilty person. It broke the chain of evidence. He used me, I said. I felt a flush of anger rise up my neck. He didn't ask for help. He made me a mule. Yes, Hollis said. She didn't apologize. She didn't soften the blow. He was desperate. He had been trying to get that briefcase to a contact at the Department of Justice for 3 weeks. Every time he tried to move, they blocked him. They froze his accounts. They bugged his car. He was running out of moves. You were the last roll of the dice. I'm not a spy, I said. My voice shook. I'm a woman trying to get a job. I have a life. I have problems of my own. I don't want this drama. I want to give the key to the police and go home. Hollis leaned forward. Her eyes locked onto mine. You already have drama. Willow, she said. You just didn't start it. I stared at her. You think you can walk away? She asked. You think you can go to the police station, hand over the evidence of a $12 million laundering scheme involving the biggest bank in the region, and they'll just pat you on the head and send you on your way? That's how it works, I said weakly. That's how it's supposed to work. Hollis pulled a manila folder from her bag. She slid a photograph across the table. It was a grainy, zoomed-in shot taken from a security camera. It showed the bus station. In the background, near the vending machines, was a man. He wore a generic windbreaker and jeans. He looked like a commuter waiting for a transfer. Look at his feet, Hollis said. I looked. The man was standing with his feet shoulder-width apart. His weight balanced on the balls of his feet. His right hand was hovering near his waist, hidden by the jacket. That's not a commuter, Hollis said. That is a tactical stance. That is muscle memory. That man is waiting for a threat. Gideon saw him. That's why he didn't leave the station. He knew he was boxed in. He knew if he walked out those doors with the briefcase, he would have a heart attack, or get hit by a car, or just vanish. So he gave it to you. He died? I asked. The question came out as a whisper. We don't know, Hollis said, but he's gone, and the people who took him know you talked to him. I looked at the photo again. The man in the windbreaker looked so normal. That was the terrifying part. The danger didn't look like danger. It looked like the background of my life. Hollis tapped the folder. I need you to look at something. Gideon told me you were sharp. He said you noticed the camera angles. He said you had the eyes of an auditor. She opened the folder. Inside were copies of the documents I had seen in the storage unit. The spreadsheets from Merriwick Community Lift. The transaction logs from Pinevale Trust. I recognize these, I said. I saw them in the unit. Look closer, Hollis said, specifically at the transaction codes. I pulled the papers toward me. I took a pen from my purse. My hands were steady now. This was work. This was data. I understood data. I ran my finger down the column of wire transfers. Code 704. Code 704. Code 704. That's an internal routing number, I said. It's not a standard Swift code. It's a departmental override. Exactly, Hollis said. What department? I looked at the prefix. PVT-CR-704. CR usually stands for Community Relations or Corporate Responsibility. I said, but the override. That means the approval didn't go through the standard algorithm. It was manually authorized by a human. Hollis said. I looked at the timestamps. Every transfer was authorized at exactly 4:55 in the afternoon on a Friday. They're doing it right before the weekend settlement window closes. I said, it prevents the automated flagging system from catching the anomaly until Monday morning. By then, the money is already in the contractor's account. Smart, Hollis said. It's not just smart. I said, it's institutional. You can't do this from the outside. You need someone with admin privileges at the bank to approve the override every single week. I kept reading. I flipped to the second page. The list of consulting partners for Merriwick Community Lift. My eyes scanned the list. Northline Restoration, Apex Consulting, and then I saw it. Line 42, Briar Ridge Health Systems. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my hairline. What is it? Hollis asked. Briar Ridge? I said, That's where I used to work. Hollis didn't look surprised. She just watched me. I was the senior compliance officer at Briar Ridge. I said, 6 months ago, there was a discrepancy in the inventory reporting. High-value medical equipment. It looked like we had purchased it. But it never arrived. I flagged it. I refused to sign off on the quarterly report until I saw the physical assets. And what happened? Hollis asked. I was called into the CFO's office. I said, he told me I was being difficult. He told me it was a clerical error. A delayed shipment. He told me to sign the report. I refused. 2 days later, an internal investigation found that I had misfiled the purchase orders. They said I was incompetent. They said I cost the hospital a grant renewal because of my negligence. They fired me. They leaked it to the press. I looked at the document again. Briar Ridge was listed as receiving a $50,000 consulting fee from Merriwick Community Lift in the same month I was fired. It wasn't a clerical error. I whispered, no. Hollis said, it was a payoff. The hospital was part of the network. They were probably washing money through equipment purchases that never happened. You stumbled onto a laundering node. I felt sick. I felt a physical wave of nausea. My life. I said, my career, my reputation. They destroyed it all for $50,000? Hollis shook her head. No, they destroyed it to protect the pipeline. The $50,000 was just the transaction fee. The pipeline moves millions. You were a pebble in the gears. Willow. So they crushed you. I sat back in the plastic chair. The noise of the cafeteria faded away. I was alone in a tunnel of realization. It wasn't my fault. For 6 months, I had woken up every morning hating myself. I had replayed that week in my head 1,000 times, wondering where I messed up, wondering if I really was bad at my job. I had taken the blame. I had internalized the shame, but I hadn't messed up. I had been right. They didn't fire me because I was wrong. I said, they fired me because I was doing my job. Hollis nodded. And that is why Gideon chose you. He knew about Briar Ridge. He knew you had been burned. He figured if anyone would understand what was happening, it would be the woman who had already been a victim of it. Just then, my phone buzzed. Not the flip phone, my personal smartphone. I looked at the screen. It was an email notification. Subject, update regarding your interview. It was from the logistics firm, the job I was supposed to interview for yesterday. I opened it. Dear Ms. Russell, thank you for your interest in the compliance manager position. While your qualifications are impressive, we have received information regarding adverse background concerns that make us unable to proceed with your candidacy at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. I read the phrase again. Adverse background concerns. I grabbed the stack of documents Hollis had spread out. I flipped through the Pine Vale Trust memos. There it was. A memo regarding vendor vetting. All contractors must be screened for adverse background concerns prior to fund dispersal. It was the exact same phrasing. It wasn't standard HR language. It was their language. They're tracking me. I said. I held up the phone. They killed the interview. Hollis looked at the email. They have you on a list. she said. It's an informal blacklist. Once you are marked as a liability by Pine Vale or their partners, that marker follows you. You won't get hired in this city. You won't get a loan. You won't get an apartment. They will starve you out until you leave or until you break. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something denser. It was the feeling of being cornered. They are erasing me, I said. Yes, Hollis said. So, you have a choice. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Choice 1, she said. You walk away. You give me the key. You give me the drive. And you get on a bus to another state. Change your name legally. Start over waiting tables in Arizona. Hope they lose interest. They might. If you disappear effectively enough, they might decide you aren't worth the resources to hunt down. And choice 2? I asked. We fight, she said, but we don't fight with guns. We fight with paper. We build a timeline so airtight, so undeniable, that they can't spin it. We document the connections between the bank, the nonprofit, and the hospital. We prove that Gideon Slate was murdered to cover it up. We make the truth louder than their lies. And what happens to me? You become the witness, she said. You become the face of the story. It will be ugly. They will drag your name through the mud again. They will say you are crazy. They will dig up every mistake you ever made. But you get your name back, Hollis said. Eventually, if we win. I looked at the documents. I looked at the line item for Briar Ridge Health Systems. I thought about the old man's shaking hands. If you want to live normal, throw that away. I couldn't go back to normal. Normal was a lie. Normal was a system that allowed thieves to ruin people like me and kill people like Gideon. I'll help you, I said. Hollis nodded. Good. But I have rules. I said. She raised an eyebrow. Rule 1. I said, no collateral damage. I won't do anything that puts innocent people in danger. I won't use anyone like Gideon used me. Agreed, Hollis said. Rule 2. I said, I won't lie. We don't fabricate evidence. We don't spin. If we catch them with the truth. If we have to lie to win, then we are just like them. Hollis looked at me for a long moment. A faint smile touched her lips. It was the first time I had seen her look anything other than grim. You really are a compliance officer. She said, I am. I said, and I'm going to audit them. The meeting ended as quickly as it had begun. Hollis took the documents back. She told me to keep the flip phone and the key. She told me to go about my day, buy groceries. She said, be seen doing mundane things. Make them think you are just a confused woman trying to get by. I left the hospital. The afternoon sun was blinding. The city of Marowak looked deceptively peaceful. Traffic moved in a steady rhythm. People walked dogs. The sky was a perfect, innocent blue. I drove to a grocery store near my apartment, a supermart with fluorescent lights and wide aisles. It felt safe. I pushed a cart down the cereal aisle. I picked up a box of oatmeal. I checked the price. I compared it to the generic brand. I put the generic brand in my cart. I was acting. I was performing the role of Willow Russell. Unemployed woman on a budget. I moved to the produce section. I was bagging apples when I felt a presence beside me. I looked up. A man was standing there. He was in his 40s, wearing a fleece vest and khakis. He looked like a soccer dad. He had a cart full of frozen pizzas and soda. The apples look good today, he said. He had a nice smile, a friendly, neighborly smile. Yes, I said, turning back to the bin. They do. You're Willow, right? He asked. I froze. I didn't turn around. I gripped the plastic bag in my hand. I saw you at the checkout last week, he said. Easy mistake. I just have a good memory for faces. I turned slowly. I didn't know him. I had never seen him before. I don't think we've met. I said, small city, huh? He said. He chuckled. It was a warm, easy sound, but his eyes didn't crinkle. They remained flat, observant. He took a step closer. Not aggressively, just enough to lower his voice. You know, my sister had a rough patch recently. He said, lost her job, got mixed up in some legal trouble she didn't understand. It was sad. I stared at him. She tried to fight it. He said. He picked up an apple and turned it over in his hand. She thought she was doing the right thing, but she didn't understand how things worked. She ended up losing everything: her house, her car, her peace of mind. He put the apple back. He looked at me. Some fights ruin people. Willow, he said, softly, sometimes it's better to just move on, take a vacation, a long one. He smiled again. Anyway, nice meeting you. Take care of yourself. He pushed his cart away, whistling a tuneless melody. I stood there in the produce section, surrounded by the smell of wet lettuce and earth. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. It was a perfect threat. If I told anyone, I would sound paranoid. A man in the grocery store told me to take a vacation. It sounded like friendly advice, but it wasn't. It was a boundary line. It was them telling me that they could touch me anywhere. In the hospital, in the grocery store. There was no safe zone. I abandoned my cart. I left the apples. I walked out of the store, my legs shaking. I drove home. I kept checking my mirrors, but there was no black sedan, no obvious tail, just the invisible pressure of a city that was suddenly hostile to my existence. My apartment was on the second floor of a converted house. It was small, but it was mine. It was the one place where I could lock the door and pretend the world made sense. I unlocked the front door. I stepped inside. The air in the apartment felt different, stale. I stood in the entryway, listening. Silence. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. I walked into the kitchen. My steps faltered. On the small wooden table in the center of the kitchen, there was a single object. It was a plastic keycard, a white card with a magnetic strip. The logo on it was a stylized sun setting over a mountain. The Vista Motor Lodge. It was the keycard to the room I had slept in last night. The keycard I had left on the dresser when I walked out this morning. There was no note. There were no fingerprints visible. It was just sitting there, perfectly centered on the placemat. I stared at it. They had gone to the motel. They had retrieved the keycard from my room, and then they had come here, picked the lock on my apartment, and left it for me to find. It was a demonstration of reach. We know where you were. We know where you are. We can come in whenever we want. I backed away from the table. I backed all the way to the wall until my shoulder blades hit the plaster. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. I looked at the keycard. It was a harmless piece of plastic. But in that moment, it looked like a weapon. My privacy was gone. My home was gone. I pulled the flip phone out of my pocket. I looked at it. They wanted me to run. That was the message. Run, or we will come closer next time. I closed my hand around the phone. I felt the hard edges of the plastic digging into my palm. I thought about the man in the grocery store. Some fights ruin people. I was already ruined. They had seen to that 6 months ago. I had nothing left to lose but the truth. I opened the phone. I dialed the only number in the contacts. Hollis answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're safe," she said. "They were in my apartment," I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. "Get out," Hollis said. "Now?" "No," I said. "Willow." "No," I repeated. "I'm not running. I'm done running." I looked at the keycard on the table. "When do we start?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, I heard the rustle of papers on her end. "Meet me at the library in an hour," she said. "Bring the drive. We're going to burn them down." I hung up. I stood up. I walked to the table. I picked up the keycard. I snapped it in half. I threw the pieces in the trash. I went to my bedroom and packed a bag. Not to run away, but to go to war. We established our command center in the basement of a university library 3 towns over. It was Hollis's idea. She said universities had the fastest internet and the most indifferent staff. Nobody cared if 2 women spent 6 hours scanning documents on a flatbed scanner in the corner of the media lab. The process was tedious, repetitive, and absolutely vital. We were building a chain of custody. Hollis taught me the term, in criminal law. It refers to the chronological documentation of evidence. In our world, the world of whistleblowers and targets, It meant survival. If the physical papers in Gideon's briefcase were destroyed, the story had to survive. We scanned every page at high resolution. Then we encrypted the files. Then we uploaded them to 3 different cloud servers, each registered under a different alias, paid for with prepaid debit cards, bought with cash. "We are making you redundant," Hollis said. The scanner hummed, a rhythmic beam of light passing under the glass. "If they kill you, the story still comes out. If they arrest you, the story comes out. The moment they realize that erasing you doesn't erase the data, you become less valuable as a target." It was a grim kind of insurance. I watched my name, Willow Russell, flash on the screen as we labeled the files. I was turning my life into a digital ghost. While the scanner worked, I worked. I did what I had been trained to do. I audited the fraud. I focused on Northline Restoration Group. In the Merriwick Community Lift ledgers, Northline was the primary recipient of the revitalization grants. They were billing for roof repairs, structural reinforcement, and lead pipe removal in the poorest zip codes of the city. I pulled up the work orders. They were detailed, addresses, dates of completion, cost of materials. They even had before and after photos attached to the invoices. I pulled up a project on Elm Street, a complete roof replacement billed at $22,000. The after photo showed a pristine, charcoal gray shingled roof under a bright sun. I opened a new tab and pulled up Google Street View. The image was dated 2 months after the alleged completion date. The roof on Elm Street was not charcoal gray. It was a patchwork of rotting tar paper and blue plastic tarps held down by bricks. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I checked another address, a porch reconstruction on Oak Avenue. The invoice showed gleaming new wood and fresh paint. I ran a reverse image search on the photo. It popped up immediately. It wasn't a house in Merriwick. It was a stock photo from a real estate listing in Columbus, Ohio, from 3 years ago. "They aren't just overcharging," I said, my voice low in the quiet library. "They aren't doing the work at all. They are billing for phantom repairs. They are taking millions of dollars to fix houses that are falling down, and they are leaving the people to rot while they paste stock photos into a PDF." Hollis looked over my shoulder. Her face was hard. "That is how they hide it," she said. "Who checks? The inspectors are probably paid off. Or they are overworked and just sign the paperwork based on the photos. And the homeowners? They are poor. They don't have lawyers. If they complain, they get told they are on a waiting list." It was repulsive. It wasn't just theft. It was theft from the people who needed the money the most. I looked at the totals. $400,000 in 1 month, funneled to Northline, then washed through the bank, then sent back to the decision-makers as consulting fees. "We need a human," Hollis said. "The paper is good. The paper is damning. But juries hate math. They need a voice. We need someone inside Merriwick Community Lift who knows this is happening." I pointed to a name on the bottom of a purchase order. "Prepared by Marcus Lenta." "I know this name," I said. "I met him at a nonprofit mixer 2 years ago. He's an accountant, quiet guy, nervous. He told me he was worried about his student loans." "Find him," Hollis said. I found Marcus Lenta at a coffee shop near the nonprofit's headquarters. It was his lunch break. I knew this because I had been watching the building from a rental car for 2 hours. When he walked in, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world in his messenger bag. He was young, maybe 28, but his hairline was receding and he had dark circles under his eyes. I waited until he had his latte. Then I approached his table. "Marcus?" I asked. He looked up, startled. He blinked, trying to place me. "Willow? Willow Russell?" he asked. I sat down opposite him. I didn't smile. "I didn't have the energy for social lubrication. I need to talk to you about Northline Restoration," I said. The color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might faint. He looked around the coffee shop, his eyes darting to the door, the counter, the window. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. His voice was a harsh whisper. "I have the invoices." "Marcus," I said, "I have the bank records. I know about the stock photos. I know the work isn't getting done, And I see your signature on the intake forms. Marcus gripped his cup. His knuckles were white. You shouldn't be here, he said. You need to leave. I'm not the one in trouble, Marcus. But you are. When this breaks, and it will break, they are going to blame you. You're the signatory. You're the lower mid-level guy they will throw to the wolves to save the board. He flinched. He knew I was right. He had probably been telling himself the same thing for months. They said it was temporary. He whispered. They said it was just a cash flow bridge, that the work would get done eventually, but it didn't. I said. Marcus looked down at the table. I can't talk to you. I have a family. Willow, my wife is pregnant. If you talk to me, we can protect you. I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe it was just a hope. We have an investigative reporter. We have evidence. If you come forward as a whistleblower, you get immunity. If you wait until the FBI kicks down the door, you get prison. He wavered. I saw the indecision in his eyes. He wanted to be unburdened. He wanted to stop looking over his shoulder. Meet us, I said. Tonight, 6 o'clock. The library on 4th. Okay, he said. He sounded defeated. Okay, I'll bring the originals. He stood up and left. I watched him go, feeling a surge of triumph. We had him. We had the human element. But Marcus never showed up at the library. At 6:15, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. It was a picture of a letter, a formal letter on state government letterhead. Notice of comprehensive personal tax audit. It was addressed to Marcus and his wife. It demanded 5 years of back taxes, receipts for every expense, and an immediate freeze of their assets pending investigation. Below the photo was a text message. I can't. They know. I stared at the screen. The letter was dated today. It had been hand-delivered to his house 3 hours after I spoke to him. Hollis looked at the phone. She let out a slow breath. They are listening, she said. Or they are watching him. It's just an audit. I said, we can fight an audit. It's not just an audit. Willow, she said, it's a message. They are telling him that they can turn his life off. They can freeze his accounts. They can make him homeless before his baby is born. That is how fear works. They don't have to break his legs. They just have to break his future. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the library's air conditioning. It was the realization of the scope of their power. They could weaponize the state bureaucracy in an afternoon. We lost him. I said, we didn't lose him. Hollis said, we just learned that we can't use anyone who has something to lose. We needed to aim higher. If the foot soldiers were too terrified to talk, we needed to look at the generals. I went back to the documents. I looked at the board of directors for Merriwick Community Lift. The chairperson was Evelyn Vance. Everyone in Merriwick knew Evelyn Vance. She was the widow of a steel magnate. She was 70 years old, with perfect silver hair and a reputation for saintliness. She funded the Children's Hospital wing. She ran the literacy program. She was the grandmother of the city. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to believe she was the mastermind sitting in a dark room counting her stolen millions. But the documents didn't support it. I tracked the signature flow. Evelyn signed the annual reports. She signed the broad strategic grants. But the specific authorizations, the ones that sent money to Northline, were signed by a proxy, a vice chair of operations. I dug deeper. I found emails attached to the file Gideon had compiled. They were from Evelyn to the vice chair. Dear Robert, I am so pleased we are helping the families on Elm Street. Please ensure the funds are expedited. I trust your judgment on the contractors completely. She didn't know. She was the shield. They were using her impeccable reputation to cover their theft. Who would investigate a charity run by Evelyn Vance? It would be like investigating Mother Teresa. I looked at Hollis. She's innocent. I said, does it matter? Hollis asked. She's the chair. It happened on her watch. Her negligence allowed it. It matters to me. I said, if we expose this, we destroy her. She's 70 years old. Her legacy will be a fraud she didn't commit. Hollis looked at me with that sharp, assessing gaze. This is the cost. Willow, she said, collateral damage. You can't perform surgery without cutting skin. Evelyn Vance is a grown woman. If she signed papers she didn't read, that is on her. We can't save everyone. I struggled with it. I thought about the old man. Gideon. He had tried to save me. He had told me to throw the key away if I wanted to be normal. He understood the weight of involving innocent people. I'm not saving her, I said, but I'm not going to revel in it. We stick to the facts. We don't paint her as a villain. We paint her as a victim of the same system. Fine, Hollis said, but we need legal cover. If we publish this, Pine Vale Trust will sue us for libel before the ink is dry. We met the attorney in a diner 2 towns over. His name was David Corin, and he worked for the Larkstone Accountability Project, a legal watchdog group that specialized in corporate fraud. David was young, sharp, and cynical. He read through our summary while eating a plate of fries. It's solid, he said, wiping ketchup from his lip. The paper trail is good. The audio recording of the meeting in the car, the one on the USB drive, is better. That's your smoking gun. That connects the bank executive to the threat against Gideon. So we can publish? I asked. David laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You can publish, he said, and then the machine will turn on. What do you mean? Willow. Look at you, he said. He gestured to my face. You're tired. You're stressed. You have a gap in your resume. You were fired from your last job for incompetence. I was framed. I snapped. David held up a hand. I know that. Hollis knows that. But the public? To the public. You are a disgruntled ex-employee with a history of mental instability and a vendetta against the establishment. That is the narrative they will run. They will call me crazy. They will call you worse, David said. They will say you are confused about the numbers. They will bring out 5 experts who will testify that these transaction codes are standard industry practice. They will say the audio recording is doctored or taken out of context. They will drown the truth in a flood of technicalities and character assassination. I felt my chest tighten. I felt the familiar urge to explain, to pull out my certifications, to show him my college transcripts, to prove that I was reliable, that I was smart, that I was good. No, I stopped myself. I realized something in that diner booth. For my entire life, I had been over-explaining. When I was late, when I made a mistake, when I was right. I offered paragraphs of justification for my own existence. It was a trauma response. It was the habit of a person who is used to not being believed. I looked at David. I didn't reach for my resume. I didn't raise my voice. I don't care what they call me. I said, my voice was level. I don't need them to like me. I just need them to see the documents. David looked at me, surprised by the shift in my tone. You're tough, he said. I'm not tough. I said, I'm just done begging for credibility. I have the proof. Let the proof stand. David nodded. Okay. We prepare the filings, but we hold the release. We need one more thing. We need to prove intent. We need to prove they knew Gideon was onto them and they stopped him. I went back to the motel, not the Vista. I never went back there. We were staying in a short-term rental apartment booked under Hollis's cousin's name. I sat on the couch and opened the flip phone. I had been afraid to touch it, afraid it was a beacon, but Hollis had swapped the SIM card and swept it for bugs. I checked the voicemail. There was a message I hadn't listened to. It was dated 3 days ago, the day Gideon died, or vanished. I pressed play. Gideon's voice filled the room. It was shaky, breathless, backed by the sound of wind. Willow. If you're hearing this, they followed the wrong person on purpose. That means they're impatient. They tracked a courier to the airport. Thinking it was me, it bought me 2 hours. That's how I got the key to you. He coughed. It sounded wet. I didn't choose you by accident. Willow, do you remember the compliance seminar in Chicago? 5 years ago? The speaker was mocking you for asking about the ethical sourcing protocols. Everyone laughed. I froze. I remembered that seminar. I had been 28, eager, and naive. The speaker had made a joke about bleeding hearts in the boardroom. I had turned bright red and sat down. I was in the back row. Gideon's voice said, I wrote you a note. I said, you were right. You kept that note on your desk for the rest of the day. I saw you look at it when you got nervous. I put a hand to my mouth. I remembered the note. It was on a yellow sticky pad. You were right. Don't let them silence you. I had kept it. I still had it, somewhere in a box of old work things in my storage closet. I chose you, Gideon said, because I remembered you as someone who did the right thing when it cost nothing. I hoped you'd be the kind of person who does the right thing when it costs everything. The message ended. I sat there in the silence. It wasn't random. It wasn't just because I was at the bus station. He had recognized me. He had watched me pay for his ticket and seen the same woman who had stood up in that seminar. He had bet his life on my integrity. Tears pricked my eyes. But they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of validation. Gideon Slate had seen me. When everyone else saw a scapegoat or a nuisance, he had seen a partner. I won't let you down. Gideon, I whispered to the empty room. The next morning, the squeeze began. It started with my car insurance. I received an email notification that my policy had been canceled effective immediately due to risk assessment volatility. Then my debit card was declined at a gas station. I called the bank, not Pinevale, but a different national chain. The representative told me my account was flagged for suspicious activity verification and would be frozen for 7 to 10 business days. Then my landlord called. He was a decent guy who usually left me alone. Willow, I got a complaint about noise from your unit, he said, screaming, banging on the walls. I haven't been home in 2 days. I said, look, I don't want trouble, he said, but if the police get called, I have to look at eviction. Just keep it down, okay? I hung up. They were doing exactly what David had warned about. They were dismantling the infrastructure of my life. They couldn't shoot me in the street, so they were cutting off my mobility, my money, and my housing. They were trying to make me too busy surviving to fight them. It was surgical, it was bloodless, and it was terrifyingly effective. I called Hollis. They're squeezing me. I said, everything is breaking at once. Good, Hollis said. Good? It means they are panicked, she said. They are throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. They want you to break. They want you to call them and beg for a deal. We need to turn the tables, I said. We need to know who is pulling the strings. We need to prove they are watching me right now. We set a trap. It was a simple plan. We needed to leak a piece of information that was specific, harmless, and completely fabricated. I went to a public payphone, one of the few left in the city. I called my own voicemail on my frozen cell phone. I knew they would be monitoring the access logs. I left a message for myself. I pitched my voice to sound frantic. Willow, it's me. I found the second drive, the backup Gideon mentioned. It was in the lining of his old coat. It has the video from the boardroom. I'm going to stash it at the old library Dropbox tonight. I hung up. Then we waited. We sat in the rental car, parked 2 blocks away from the library Dropbox. We weren't watching the box. We were watching my phone. 2 hours passed. My flip phone, the one only Hollis and Gideon knew about, stayed silent, but my personal cell phone, which I had turned on just for this, began to ring. It was a local number. I answered it. Hello? I sounded breathless. Ms. Russell? A voice asked. It was a woman. Smooth, professional, warm. Yes? My name is Sarah. I'm an executive assistant at Pinevale Trust. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was the senior VP, the man whose signature was on the transfers. What do you want? I asked. Mr. Sterling understands you've been going through a difficult time. Sarah said, with the insurance and the housing issues, he wants to help. He believes there has been a misunderstanding regarding your previous employment. I didn't say anything. He would like to offer you a consulting arrangement, she continued, to help clarify some compliance issues. He understands you might have come into possession of some legacy materials from a former contractor. She paused. If you bring those materials to us, specifically any digital media, Mr. Sterling can ensure that your bank accounts are unfrozen within the hour, and he would be happy to discuss a very generous severance package for your time. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. They had taken the bait. I hadn't mentioned the second drive to anyone but my own voicemail. They had tapped my phone, they had heard the lie, and they had panicked enough to offer a bribe directly from the VP's office. "Sarah," I said. "Yes, Ms. Russell? Tell Mr. Sterling I don't have a second drive." I said. There was a silence on the line. A stunned, heavy silence. "But I do have a recording of this call," I said, "and now I have proof that Pinevale Trust is monitoring private citizens and offering bribes to suppress evidence." I hung up. I looked at Hollis. She was grinning. "We got them," she said. We drove away. I looked out the window at the city of Marwick. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a battlefield, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I had a weapon, but I knew the response wouldn't be another phone call. They had tried money. They had tried bureaucracy. Now, they would try something else. As we turned the corner, I saw a black SUV pull out of a side street and slide into the lane behind us. It didn't have lights. It didn't have sirens. It just had dark-tinted windows and a grille that looked like a clenched jaw. "They're behind us," I said. Hollis looked in the mirror. "Hold on," she said. She slammed on the gas. The restaurant was called The Avery. It was the kind of place where business was conducted over $20 salads and sparkling water, neutral ground for people who could afford to be civil while they destroyed each other. I sat in a booth near the back, facing the door. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on top of my purse. Inside the purse, taped to the lining, was a digital recorder the size of a stick of gum. A second recorder was taped to the small of my back, under my blouse. Hollis was parked across the street in a rental car with tinted windows. David, the attorney from Larkstone, was sitting at the bar 3 tables away, nursing a club soda and reading a newspaper like an extra in a noir film. I was terrified, but the terror felt different now. It wasn't the frantic, animal panic of the bus station. It was cold. It was heavy. It was the weight of a decision made. Sarah arrived at 12:15. She looked exactly like she sounded on the phone, polished, efficient, and aggressively harmless. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon that didn't allow for a single loose strand. She spotted me and smiled. It was a smile practiced in a mirror. "Willow," she said, extending a hand, "I am so glad you agreed to meet. I'm Sarah." I took her hand. It was dry and cool. "I'm here," I said. She sat down. A waiter appeared instantly, but she waved him away with a flick of her wrist. "I want to respect your time," she said. "Mr. Sterling is very grateful that you were willing to listen. He feels terrible about the confusion regarding your situation." "My situation?" I repeated. "You mean the fact that my car insurance was canceled and my bank accounts are frozen?" Sarah sighed. She opened a slim leather portfolio and removed a thick envelope. "Administrative errors," she said. "Regrettable automated flags. The banking system is sensitive to risk. Willow, when a name is associated with instability, the algorithms react. Mr. Sterling wants to correct that manually." She slid the envelope across the table. It was heavy. "Inside this envelope is a cashier's check for $75,000, she said. "It is categorized as a consulting retainer. It is fully taxable, fully legal. It is an advance on your future services." I looked at the envelope. I didn't touch it. "And what services would I be providing?" I asked. Sarah pulled a single sheet of paper from the portfolio. She placed it next to the envelope. "Clarification," she said. I looked at the document. It was a sworn affidavit. I read the text upside down. I, Willow Russell, hereby state that my interactions with the individual known as Gideon Slate were brief and characterized by his evident mental distress. Mr. Slate approached me in a state of paranoia, forcing documents upon me that I did not understand. I accepted them under duress. Upon later review, I realized the materials were disjointed and incoherent. I disposed of them immediately. Any statements to the contrary were made in a moment of panic and confusion. I read it twice. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. It didn't just clear Pinevale Trust. It painted Gideon as a lunatic And me as a hysterical woman who had imagined a conspiracy. You want me to lie? I said. Sarah tilted her head. Is it a lie? You met a man at a bus station. He was agitated. He was running from authorities. He gave you stolen property. We are just asking you to contextualize it. He wasn't agitated. I said. He was terrified. And the documents aren't incoherent. They show $12 million in laundered funds. Sarah's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Willow, she said softly, look at where you are. You have no job. You have no money. You are living in a motel. You are fighting a war you cannot win against an institution that has existed for 100 years. She tapped the envelope. This is a fresh start. You sign this. The accounts unlock. The insurance is reinstated. You take this money. You move to a nice city. Maybe Denver. Maybe Austin. And you rebuild. You get your life back. And Gideon? I asked. What happens to his name? He doesn't have a name anymore. Sarah said. He's a closed file. Why sacrifice your future for a ghost? I reached for the water glass. My hand was trembling. I let it tremble. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to think she had won. I picked up the pen she had placed on the affidavit. I hovered the tip over the signature line. If I sign this, I said, it's over? It's over. She promised. I looked up at her. And what if I don't? I asked. The air at the table changed. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away. Sarah sat back. She didn't look like an assistant anymore. She looked like a shark. Then we stopped being polite, she said. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a reality check, she said. You think you are special. Willow, you think you are the hero of a story. You aren't. You are a clerical error we are trying to fix. She leaned in closer. Her perfume smelled of expensive lilies. You don't understand how replaceable you are, she whispered. Gideon Slate was a professional, and he is gone. You are nobody. If you walk out of here with that recording device you think is hidden in your purse. You won't make it to the parking lot with your reputation intact. By tonight, you will be the crazy woman who tried to blackmail a bank. My heart hammered against the recorder on my back. She knew, or she guessed. I put the pen down. I am not nobody. I said, my voice was steady. I am the person who knows where the money went. I stood up. Keep your money. Sarah, and tell Mr. Sterling that if he wants to fix a clerical error, he should have checked the math on the Northline account. I turned and walked away. I expected a hand on my shoulder. I expected security to swarm me. But nothing happened. Sarah just sat there, watching me go, her hand resting on the envelope. I walked past David at the bar. He didn't look at me. I walked out the door and into the blinding sunlight. I crossed the street to Hollis's car. I got in and locked the door. Drive, I said. We drove 3 miles before anyone spoke. Hollis kept checking the mirrors. Did you get it? She asked. I pulled the recorder from my purse. I pressed stop. She offered me $75,000, I said, and she told me I was replaceable. She said Gideon was gone. Hollis exhaled. That's good. That's usable. We met David at a safe house, a small, dusty office above a dry cleaner that Larkstone used for sensitive interviews. We played the tape. David listened, his eyes closed. When it finished, he rubbed his temples. It's compelling, he said, but it's not enough. What do you mean? I asked. She threatened me. She offered a bribe. She offered a settlement. David corrected. A good lawyer, and Pine Vale has an army of them, will argue that she was offering a standard severance package to avoid nuisance litigation. And the threat? She didn't say we will kill you. She said you will be the crazy woman. That's not a death threat. That's a PR strategy. I felt a surge of frustration. They can say anything. I said, they can spin anything. Exactly. David said, that is why we can't publish yet. If we release this tape now, they will launch the smear campaign immediately. They will release your personnel file from Briar Ridge. They will paint you as an extortionist. We get one shot at this. Willow, we need the kill shot. What is the kill shot? Hollis asked. Intent. David said, we have proof of fraud. We have proof of bribery. We need proof of violence. We need to prove that they didn't just want to discredit Gideon Slate. We need to prove they plan to silence him permanently. That moves this from white-collar crime to conspiracy to commit murder. I thought about the storage unit. I thought about Gideon's note. If I vanish, it wasn't an accident. He knew. I said, he knew they were coming. Knowing isn't proof, David said. We need a document, a text, a recording where they say the words. I closed my eyes. I tried to think like Gideon. He was a man of contingencies. He had put the key in the timetable. He had put the documents in the briefcase. He had put the backup drive in the book. Was there something else? I remembered the email he had sent to himself, the one printed in the stack. Safest place is where they stop looking. I stood up. I need to go back to Harbor Lock. I said, it's too dangerous. Hollis said, they know you have the key. They know I went there yesterday. I said, they think I cleaned it out. They think I took everything. That makes it the safest place. They've stopped looking there. We waited until nightfall. The industrial park was a graveyard of shadows and sodium lights. Hollis dropped me off a block away. I wore a dark hoodie and gloves. I approached the orange gate of Harbor Lock. I punched in the code Gideon had written on the timetable. Access denied. I tried again. Red light. They locked me out. I walked around the perimeter fence. I found a spot where the ground had eroded near a drainage ditch. I squeezed under the chain link, the metal snagging my jacket. I ran low along the rows of units. Row A, Row B, Row C. I turned the corner to Row D. I stopped. Unit 402 was open. The door was rolled up. I pressed myself against the corrugated metal wall of Unit 401. I listened. No sound. No movement. I peeked around the edge. The unit was empty. Not just empty of the briefcase, empty of dust. It had been swept. The chair was gone. The light bulb had been removed. It was a black void. It had been reassigned, or sanitized. I stepped inside. I clicked on a small pen light. Shielding the beam with my hand, the floor was spotless. They had done a thorough job. If there had been anything else in here, it was gone. But Gideon was paranoid. He didn't just hide things. He buried them. I looked at the walls. The construction was cheap. Plywood sheeting over metal studs. Safest place is where they stop looking. I went to the back right corner. I remembered seeing Gideon's handwriting on the map in the briefcase. He had circled the corners of the page. I knelt down. I ran my gloved fingers along the rubber baseboard molding. It was glued tight. I checked the left corner. Tight. I checked the front corners near the door track. The front right baseboard felt loose. There was a tiny gap between the rubber and the concrete floor. I pulled out a small pocket knife. I wedged it behind the rubber strip and pried. It gave way with a soft pop. Behind the baseboard, tucked into the hollow space of the metal stud, was a small object wrapped in wax paper. My heart leaped. I pulled it out. I unfolded the wax paper. It was a USB drive. Tiny, the size of a thumbnail. I shoved it into my pocket. I pushed the baseboard back into place. I ran. Back in the safe house, we plugged the drive into Hollis's air-gapped laptop. There was one file, a video file, Marwick_transit_01.mp4. David leaned in. Hollis adjusted the volume. I held my breath. The video opened. It was dark, grainy. The camera angle was low, shooting upward from what looked like a cup holder in a car. It was a concealed recording. Two men were sitting in the front seats. Their faces were partially in shadow, lit only by streetlights passing by. I recognized the driver. It was the man from the grocery store, the friendly neighbor who had told me to take a vacation. The passenger was a man I had seen on the news. He was the chief risk officer for Pinevale Trust, a man named Arthur Vance, Evelyn Vance's nephew. The audio was crystal clear. Driver: Slate is getting skittish. He's asking about the North Line transfers again. Vance: We can't have him asking. The audit is next month. If he flags those accounts, the whole structure collapses. Driver: So what do you want? Buying him off didn't work. Intimidation isn't working. Vance: We moved to the permanent solution. Driver: You mean an accident? Vance: I mean we handle Slate. We scrub the problem. If he goes loud, we make it personal. No loose ends. Do it this weekend. Use the transit station. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Driver. Understood. The video ended. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the laptop fan. David let out a long, low whistle. That's it, he said. That is the kill shot. It wasn't just fraud. It was Arthur Vance, the nephew of the city's most beloved philanthropist, ordering a hit on an auditor. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't fear. It was something sharper. They killed him. I said, my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, hard. They planned it in a car, like they were ordering lunch. Hollis looked at me. Her eyes were full of concern. Willow? I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. I had spent my whole life following rules. I believed that if you did your job and told the truth, the system would protect you. I was wrong. The system was designed to protect men like Arthur Vance. I turned back to them. We publish. I said. David nodded. We publish. But we need a strategy. If we drop this all at once, they will try to scrub the internet. They will claim it's a deepfake. So we stagger it. Hollis said. She was typing furiously. We release the financial documents first. Get the public looking at the money. Get the questions started. Then the audio of the bribe. I said, to show the cover-up. And then, David said, when they issue their denial. When Arthur Vance stands in front of the cameras and says he is shocked by these allegations, we drop the video. I finished. We catch him in the lie. We spent the next 6 hours building the package. We wrote the press release. We prepared the encrypted blast to every major news outlet in the country. We set up a dead man's switch. If we didn't check in every 12 hours. The files would auto-publish to WikiLeaks and 3 other whistleblower sites. I watched them work. I felt like a soldier suiting up for battle. I wasn't Willow Russell, the tainted applicant. I was the weapon Gideon Slate had left behind. I'm going to lose everything. Aren't I? I asked David during a lull. David looked at me honestly. Probably. You'll be famous, which is its own kind of hell. You'll be sued. You'll be deposed. You won't be able to get a normal job for a decade. I nodded. I'm okay with that. I said, why? David asked. Because if I'm going to be ruined anyway, I said, I'm choosing the reason. I'm not being ruined for incompetence. I'm being ruined for justice. The sun was coming up. The release was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I stepped outside for fresh air. The street was quiet. The city was waking up, oblivious to the bomb that was about to go off in its foundation. My personal phone, the one I had left on for the trap, buzzed in my pocket. I frowned. Who would be calling at 6 a.m? I pulled it out. It was a text message from an unknown number. There was an image attached. I tapped to download. The image filled the screen. It was a photo taken from a distance, but the subject was clear. It was a bench, a wooden bench with peeling green paint, the bench outside Marowak Central Transit. Sitting on the bench was a man. He wore a beige windbreaker. He had gray hair that was thinning on top. He was looking down at a newspaper. It was Gideon Slate. I stared at the photo. My brain refused to process it. Gideon was dead. He had vanished. The video said they were going to handle him. I zoomed in on the photo. On the bench next to him was a newspaper, the Marowak Gazette. I could read the headline. Mayor announces new transit initiative. That was yesterday's headline. The photo was recent. My hands began to shake violently. I almost dropped the phone. Below the photo was a caption, written in all caps. He's not your friend. He used you. I felt the ground tilt under my feet. Alive? If he was alive, then what was this? Was the video a fake? Was the threat real? Or was Gideon part of it? He used you. Hollis had said it herself. He used me as a mule, a clean handoff. But if he was alive, why hadn't he contacted me? Why was I sleeping in a safe house and dodging threats while he sat on a bench reading the paper? Was I the distraction? Was I the sacrificial lamb he had thrown to the wolves so he could escape? A wave of nausea hit me. I leaned against the brick wall. The entire foundation of my anger, The idea that I was fighting for a murdered man crumbled. If he was alive, I was just a pawn in a game I didn't understand. I looked at the text again. He's not your friend. Who sent this? The bank? To make me stop? Or someone else? I couldn't trust Hollis. She was a reporter. She wanted a story. I couldn't trust David. He was a lawyer. He wanted a case. I could only trust what I could see. I looked at the photo, the bus station. It always came back to the bus station. I checked my watch. 6:30. If I showed this to Hollis, she would tell me it was a fake. She would tell me it was a psyop to make me hesitate before the release. And she might be right. But if she was wrong, we were about to launch a war based on a lie. I put the phone in my pocket. I didn't go back inside. I walked to the corner. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Merriwick Central Transit. I said, I wasn't going as a passenger this time. I wasn't going as a victim. I was going to find the ghost. The ride took 20 minutes. I watched the city scroll by. The car dealerships, the strip malls, the billboards for personal injury lawyers. We pulled up to the station. It looked exactly the same as it had on the day my life ended. The same gray concrete, the same smell of diesel. I paid the driver with the last of my cash. I stood on the sidewalk. I looked at the cameras. They're watching. Let them watch. I pulled my hood up. I walked toward the entrance. I wasn't running away anymore. I was walking into the center of the maze, and I wasn't coming out until I knew who was holding the other end of the string. I pushed through the doors. The air conditioning hit me like a slap. I scanned the concourse, and then I saw him. He was sitting on the same bench as in the photo, the beige windbreaker, the slumped shoulders. Gideon. He was alive. I felt a scream build in my throat, a mix of relief and fury so potent it made me dizzy. I started walking toward him. 1 step, 2 steps. I refused to be moved like luggage. I was the one moving now. I walked straight toward the dead man, and I prepared to demand an answer. The smell of Merriwick Central Transit was the same. It was a cocktail of diesel fumes, stale pretzels, and the damp, metallic scent of too many bodies moving through a confined space. It was the smell of my own terror from 4 days ago. But I wasn't the same person who had stood here 4 days ago. That woman had been a leaf in the wind, terrified of losing a job she didn't even have yet. That woman had been worried about being polite. I walked into the main concourse at 7:15 in the morning. I didn't pull my hood down. I didn't hide my face. I looked up at the black domes of the security cameras mounted on the support pillars. I see you, I thought, and you see me. I walked to the center of the floor. I stood directly under the main schedule board, where the destination cities flipped over with a rhythmic clattering sound. Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, canceled. I felt exposed. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. But exposure was a strange thing. When you are hiding, exposure is a weakness. When you are standing in the light on purpose, exposure is armor. If they touched me here, under these lights, in front of these 300 commuters, it wouldn't be a quiet disappearance. It would be a scene. I scanned the benches. He was there. Gideon Slate sat on the same wooden bench near the vending machines. He looked smaller than I remembered. His beige windbreaker was stained at the cuff. He was reading a newspaper, but his eyes weren't moving across the text. He was staring at the margin, his body rigid with tension. He was alive. The relief that washed over me was instantly replaced by a cold. Hard anger. He was alive, and he had let me carry his coffin. I started to walk toward him. Then I saw them. 2 men were moving through the crowd. They didn't look like police. They didn't look like security. They looked like nothing. One was wearing a gray hoodie and carrying a gym bag. The other was in a denim jacket, looking at his phone. But they were moving with a synchronized, predatory rhythm. They were approaching the bench from opposite sides, cutting off Gideon's exit routes. It was the pincer movement of professionals. Gideon didn't see them. He was looking at his shoes. I was 30 feet away. I couldn't reach him in time. If they grabbed him, if they hustled him out the side door into a waiting van, he would just be another old man who got sick at the bus station. a medical emergency, a tragedy, a loose end tied up. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the camera app. I hit the button for live. I held the phone up. High and steady. "I'm Willow Russell," I said. My voice was loud. Heads turned. A woman eating a bagel stopped chewing. "I am standing in Merriwick Central Transit. It is 7:18 in the morning." I turned the camera toward the bench. "That man on the bench is Gideon Slate." I said, "He is a forensic auditor who has been missing for 4 days, and the 2 men approaching him right now are not his friends." The man in the gray hoodie froze. He looked at me. He looked at the phone. He saw the red light on the screen. The man in the denim jacket hesitated. He was 5 feet from Gideon. I zoomed in on his face. Smile. I said, "You are broadcasting to the cloud." The dynamic of the room shattered. Commuters were looking. A security guard. A real one. Looking bored and tired. Started walking toward the commotion. The predators made a calculation. They were professionals. They knew that anonymity was their only weapon. Once the lights were on, the job was burned. The man in the denim jacket turned smoothly, like he had just remembered he left the stove on, and walked rapidly toward the south exit. The man in the gray hoodie pulled his hood lower and vanished into the crowd heading for the Platform 4 escalator. They were gone. Gideon looked up. He saw the men retreating, then he saw me. His face crumbled. It wasn't relief. It was a profound, exhausting shame. I lowered the phone, but I didn't stop recording. I walked over to him. He stood up. His legs were shaky. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. "Willow," he whispered. I stopped 2 feet away from him. I didn't offer my hand. "You're alive," I said. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was a wreck. "I'm so sorry. You let me think you were dead." I said, "You let me carry a target on my back. You let them hunt me." "I had to," he said. He reached into his pocket. His hands were trembling, just like they had been that first day. "I needed a diversion. When I gave you the key, I knew they would track the handoff. I knew they would focus on you. It bought me time to get to the safe house in Gary. I thought you would just throw the key away. I thought you would be smart enough to run." I stared at him. The message on the photo had been right. He used you. You didn't choose me because you thought I was brave. I said, "You chose me because I was disposable." Gideon looked me in the eye. For the first time, he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a man who had made a cold, calculated decision to survive. "I didn't choose you because it was fair." "Willow," he said. He took a step closer. The whisper was heavier now, weighted with the truth. "I chose you because I remembered you. I remembered that you were the girl who stood up in a room full of suits and asked why the numbers didn't add up. I chose you because I knew you wouldn't look away." He pulled a small, thick notebook from his inside pocket. It was black, bound with an elastic band. "This is the rest of it," he said. "This is the master ledger, the names, the dates, the offshore accounts. It connects Evelyn Vance directly. Not just her nephew, her—" He held it out to me. "Take it," he said. "I can't finish this. They know my face. They know where my daughter lives. I have to go. But you're already in the fight." I looked at the notebook. It was the final piece, the nail in the coffin. I looked at Gideon. He wanted me to be his mule again. He wanted to pass the burden so he could disappear. I stepped back. "No," I said. "Willow, please." "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was harder than stone. "I am not your courier. I am not your diversion. I am done being handled." I pointed to the phone in my hand. "You want this to end?" I asked. "Then you end it. You don't give it to me. You give it to the world. I'm afraid," he whispered. "So am I," I said, "but I'm doing it anyway." I turned around. I saw Hollis standing at the entrance of the station. She had arrived. She was holding up her phone, filming us. David was with her, on the phone with the police. I looked back at Gideon. "Come with me," I said, "or run. But I'm not carrying your luggage anymore." Gideon stood there for a long moment. He looked at the exit. He looked at the notebook. Then, slowly, he nodded. He didn't hand me the book. He gripped it in his own hand. He walked to my side. "Let's go," he said. The next 6 hours were a blur of uploads, phone calls, and legal filings. Hollis hit the button at 9 o'clock sharp. The website she had built went live. The Merriwick papers. It had everything. The scans of the bank transfers, the photos of the fake construction projects, the audio recording of the bribe attempt, and the video from the car, the order to kill Gideon Slate. Simultaneously, David filed an emergency injunction in the district court. He demanded the immediate freezing of assets for Pinevale Trust and Merriwick Community Lift to prevent the destruction of evidence. He attached the affidavit of Gideon Slate, who was currently sitting in a deposition room at the Larkstone offices, speaking into a microphone. We had launched the missile. Now we had to survive the explosion. The reaction was immediate and vicious. By noon, Pinevale Trust had issued a statement. They didn't apologize. They attacked. "We are the victims of a sophisticated cyber attack and an extortion plot orchestrated by a disgruntled former employee of Briar Ridge Health Systems. Willow Russell was terminated for gross incompetence and falsification of records. She is now attempting to monetize stolen data to damage the reputation of our city's most cherished institutions. They released my personnel file. They released the performance review that I had refused to sign. They released a photo of me looking disheveled leaving my apartment. I sat in the safe house and watched the news. The chyron on the screen read, "Whistleblower or extortionist." I watched strangers on social media dissect my life. "She looks crazy. Look at her eyes." I heard she tried to blackmail the VP for $1 million. Why would a bank kill an old man? This sounds like a movie plot. She's making it up. It hurt. It hurt more than I expected. I wanted to scream at the screen. I wanted to reply to every comment. I am not crazy. I am right. Hollis sat next to me. She took the remote and turned off the TV. "Don't look at the noise," she said. "Look at the signal." She pointed to her laptop. "The state attorney general has announced a press conference for tomorrow," she said. "The FBI just served a warrant on Northline restoration. The stock price of Pinevale Trust has dropped 12% in 3 hours. They are screaming about you because they are bleeding." Hollis said, "The smear is the only weapon they have left. It's not enough." I said. I looked at the blank TV screen. "People still believe them. They believe Evelyn Vance is a saint. They believe I'm a failure. We need a stage," David said. He walked into the room, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted but electric. "What kind of stage?" I asked. "The City Council Oversight Committee meets tonight at 6. David said, "It's usually a snooze fest where they approve zoning permits. But tonight, Arthur Vance is scheduled to present the annual report for the Community Lift Partnership." "He's going to show his face?" I asked. "He has to," David said. "If he cancels, he looks guilty. He's going to try to brazen it out. He's going to stand there and tell the city that everything is fine and you are a liar." I stood up. "I'm going." I said, "Willow, it will be a circus." David warned, "They might arrest you for trespassing. The room will be packed with their supporters." "I don't care." I said, "They called me incompetent. They called me a liar. I want to see Arthur Vance say that to my face." The Merriwick City Hall auditorium smelled of floor wax and old wood. It was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Cameras were set up in the aisles. The air was thick with the murmur of 100 private conversations. I sat in the third row. Hollis was on my left. Gideon was on my right. He was wearing a clean shirt David had bought him. He was shaking, but he was there. The council members sat on a raised dais behind a long, curved table. In the center sat the mayor. To his right sat Evelyn Vance. She looked regal in a navy suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a queen holding court. Arthur Vance stood at the podium. He was the man from the video, the man who had ordered the hit. He looked confident. He spoke with a smooth baritone voice. "These allegations are painful," Arthur said into the microphone. "Not because they are true, but because they attack the very heart of what we do. We help the poor. We build homes. To see our work dragged through the mud by individuals seeking 15 minutes of fame is discouraging. He paused for effect. He looked sad. We have fully cooperated with the authorities, he continued, and we are confident that when the dust settles, the truth will vindicate us. He looked out at the crowd. His eyes swept over the third row. He saw me. He didn't flinch. He smiled, a small, pitying smile. Any questions from the council? He asked. The room was silent. The council members looked at their papers. They were terrified. They knew where the money came from. They knew who buttered their bread. I felt a surge of despair. They were going to get away with it. They were going to bury the truth under a layer of procedure and politeness. Then, a microphone clicked on. It was a council member at the end of the table. A young woman named Councilwoman Holloway. She was new. She hadn't been on the payroll list in Gideon's notebook. Mr. Vance, she said. Her voice was clear. You talk about individuals seeking fame. She pointed a finger at the audience. Ms. Russell is sitting in the third row, she said. Since she is here, and since you seem so confident, why don't we let her speak? Let's hear her version. A murmur rippled through the room. The mayor leaned over to whisper something to Holloway, probably telling her to shut up. Arthur Vance gripped the podium. This is a procedural meeting. Arthur said, It is not a forum for... I think the public would like to hear it. Holloway interrupted. Unless you're afraid of what she has to say? The room went deadly quiet. The cameras swiveled toward me. I stood up. My knees were water. My heart was a bird trapped in my ribcage. I walked to the aisle. I walked toward the microphone that stood in the center of the floor, reserved for public comment. I gripped the stand. The metal was cold. I looked up at the dais. I looked at Evelyn Vance. She was staring at me with a look of icy confusion, as if I were a stain on her tablecloth. I looked at Arthur Vance. The pity was gone. His eyes were flat and dangerous. State your name for the record, the mayor said, sounding bored. Willow Russell, I said. My voice wavered. I took a deep breath. Stop explaining. Just the data. I am here to correct the record regarding the financial activities of Marowit Community Lift and Pinevale Trust. I said. My voice steadied. It became the voice I used when I was presenting an audit. Clinical, precise. On October 4th, a wire transfer of $400,000 was authorized by Arthur Vance under Code 704, an emergency override. This money was sent to Northline Restoration for a roof replacement at 742 Elm Street. I held up a piece of paper. This is a photo of 742 Elm Street taken yesterday. I said, There is no new roof. There is a blue tarp. I dropped the paper on the floor. I picked up another. On November 2nd, another transfer, $200,000, authorized by Arthur Vance, sent to Northline, returned 3 days later to a private account held by... I looked at the notebook in my hand, held by Evelyn Vance. I said, gasps from the room. Evelyn stood up. This is an outrage, she shouted. Her voice cracked. I have the routing numbers. Mrs. Vance, I said, cutting her off. I have the SWIFT codes. I have the dates. I looked at Arthur, and I have the motive. I said, I pulled out the tiny digital recorder. I held it up to the microphone. Mr. Vance said I was a liar. I said, he said I was confused. I pressed play. The sound of the car engine filled the auditorium. Then, the voices, clear and undeniable. We moved to the permanent solution. We handle Slate. If he goes loud, we make it personal. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Arthur Vance's face went gray. He stepped back from the podium as if the microphone had bitten him. I stopped the recording. That is your voice, Arthur, I said. That is you ordering the murder of the man sitting next to me. I pointed to Gideon. Gideon stood up. He looked at the dais. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a living ghost. Pandemonium broke out. Reporters were shouting questions. The mayor was banging his gavel, shouting, "Recess! Recess! This meeting is in recess!" Security guards were rushing toward the aisle. but they didn't know who to grab. Me? Arthur? I didn't move. I stood at the microphone as the room dissolved into chaos around me. I looked at Hollis. She was smiling. I looked at Arthur Vance. He was trying to leave the stage, but a wall of reporters had blocked his exit. I looked at the camera at the back of the room. The red light was on. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't unnoticeable. I was Willow Russell, and I had told the truth. The gavel kept banging, a frantic, rhythmic pulse, but it didn't matter. The sound of the truth was louder. 2 weeks later, the indictments came down. Arthur Vance was arrested at his home. He was charged with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. He was held without bail. Evelyn Vance was not arrested, but she resigned from the board of Merriwick Community Lift. Her reputation didn't survive the ledger. The grandmother of the city turned out to be just another beneficiary of the graft. She retreated to her estate, a prisoner of her own legacy. Gideon Slate entered witness protection. Before he left, he sent me one final text. No words, just a photo of a new bus ticket, one way, to a place with a beach. And me? I didn't get my job back at Briar Ridge. I didn't get an apology from the logistics firm. I was sitting in a diner, reading the classifieds. David was right. Nobody wanted to hire the whistleblower. I was too loud, too risky. The waitress came over to refill my coffee. She was a woman in her 50s, with tired eyes and a name tag that said, Betty. She poured the coffee. Then she paused. She looked at me. You're that girl, aren't you? She asked. The one from the meeting. I tensed. I waited for the insults. Troublemaker, liar. Yes, I said. I am. Betty reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a slice of pie. Cherry pie. She slid it onto the table. On the house, she said. I looked at her, surprised. My mom lives on Elm Street, Betty said. They fixed her roof yesterday. Real shingles this time. Because of you. She squeezed my shoulder. Thanks. Willow, she said. She walked away. I looked at the pie. I looked out the window at the city of Merriwick. It was still gray. It was still gritty, but the sun was trying to break through the clouds. I took a forkful of pie. It tasted sweet. I wasn't normal anymore. I would never be normal again. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't just existing, I was living. I took out my phone. I deleted the old contacts, the recruiters, the old colleagues. I opened a new contact, Hollis Mercer, investigative partner. I hit call. Hollis picked up on the first ring. I found another one. I said, a trucking company in Gary. The logs don't match the mileage. I heard Hollis smile through the phone. I'll pick you up in 10 minutes, she said. I hung up. I finished my pie. And then I got to work. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the shadows that exist right next to our daily lives, and the courage it takes to drag them into the light. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. And if you enjoyed Willow's fight for the truth, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, retribution, and the human spirit. What would you have done if you were in Willow's shoes at the bus station? Would you have thrown the key away? Share your thoughts in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time.